giving you a vocational leg up on everyone else. Here's our career Sherpa, Julie Bauke.
Yep. Every Wednesday morning at this time, Jules is on. She's a career coach here in Cincinnati and just trying to help you out in these difficult times. And even when times are good, they seem in the workplace rather difficult. Julie, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I'm great.
Yeah. What do you got for us today?
Well, there's been a lot of Tom Brenneman in the news, which caused me to think about, what do you do if someone says something derogatory or uses a slur in your workplace?
Yeah.
Because, I think we all can be part of the problem or part of the solution. And it's certainly uncomfortable when someone uses a word that is inappropriate in the workplace or ever. And, it's how do you respond to that? I mean, I think it's really, really hard to know what to do or say because you are at work. And I think we go through this calculus where that, that's, wow. But this is my colleague who I have to see every day, but I also want to stand up and say that's not right. And so the workplace provides, it's almost like among your friends or people you meet socially, it's a little bit easier, but you got to go back to work the next day and see that person again. And so I think a lot of people struggle with, how do I handle this if someone is around me and says something that I know is inappropriate?
Yeah, and it's tough, right? Because in a social/work setting, and there's an opportunity for us to go, hey, you know what? Because there was a time when what was said was allowable in society. People look at it as kind of, a teenage boys, college students and the like, and it was acceptable in society to use that slur, but it isn't now. And here's an opportunity for us to go, hey, you know what? We're better than that now. That's not cool.
Yeah, one of the things I've been doing here in the last couple months is binge watching one of my favorite shows in the late 80s and early 90s, L.A. Law. And back then it was so edgy, and I'm watching it and they're using words that I go, oh my heavens.
Right.
I didn't, because what's acceptable has evolved. And you look back and I watch some of those shows and I think, wow, because I'm looking at everything through today's eyes, it's hard to imagine that those words were ever acceptable.
Well, I remember, and I know you're old enough as I am to one of the an album that came out in the 80s, Dire Straits, right? And the song, where the chorus is "I want my MTV." He uses that word in there too. And Money for Nothing. So, Mark Knopfler was like, and that was played on all the radio stations back in the day.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And you're right. That was also the 80s. And things were definitely different. And sometimes you don't recognize it until you go back and look at the old stuff and know that you lived through it and thought it was fine. And so, I think as our culture evolves, as our language evolves, I think we have a responsibility to evolve with it. And that's part of the challenge is that some do and some don't. Now, if you're a leader, if you're a leader in your workplace, you have a different level of responsibility when it comes to confronting derogatory terms, language, behavior, than if you're not. Now, we could argue that we all have that responsibility as humans, but as a leader, if you don't take care of that, then you could be part of a lawsuit. You could be part of a situation where someone is saying it was a hostile work environment and you didn't do anything about it, and they would be right. And so I think when you take on that leadership role and people look at you as a role model at some level, whether you want to be or not, you are. And you have a special responsibility to call that out and not let that be okay in your workplace. And, even if you and the boys talk about certain things out at a bar or on the weekend, but when you come to work, you have to recognize that you're crossing that threshold and that you are responsible for setting the tone at work.
Yeah, and I think, but it's hard too because now it's a workplace thing, and it's work friends as opposed to people you may or may not hang out with and on a personal level. But should there be distinction? And if you're saying that stuff around friends in a private setting, let's say on your patio or something like that, is that just as bad that it is saying to a coworker at work? I'd probably have to say, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
if you're using it, you're still part of the problem, right?
Yeah. I think that's, and the way I look at it is, what kind of person do I want to be? And the words that Tom Brenneman used, other derogatory words, they're not even in my vocabulary. So they don't slip out. They aren't part of my language.
Did they used to be in your vocabulary, though? Ever?
No, actually
okay.
not.
Right.
No. Mm-mm.
Because I say that, from a guy's perspective, and I don't think women use that word as much as guys did. I mean, and look, middle school, high school, college, it was acceptable to use, and then you'll learn the history of that word. And I know this may be, singeing your ears if you're a millennial or younger, and I get that, because you're like, what? You what? Yeah, I mean, literally, it was okay to use that word. So a lot of people, I mean, you never can say everybody, but a lot of people use that word. And so it's like that doesn't change. And I think you still have to be held accountable, and you also have to say, own it. But it's like once you learn the history of that word, you go like, wow, this is not cool at all,
Yeah. And, I think we all have the right and responsibility to set our own boundaries. It was probably about 10 years ago where we had some people over, and I heard one of our guests use the N-word.
Oh!
And I looked at him, and I just smiled, and I said, we didn't use that word here. And just turned around and walked away. And, it was never an issue again.
Yeah.
And so I think the more we, so you take the workplace. Okay, so one of my son's friends, who's a millennial, was on a was at a work golf thing, and one of his superiors, he was in a foursome with one of his superiors, and the superior started saying, "Hey, did you see kind of the new, all the new class of hires? I'm telling you, I'd rank them 1, 2, and this one number 1, this one number 2, this one number 3 in terms of who I'd want to quote unquote spend some time with.
Mm-hmm.
How about you?" And the guy's like, he looked at him and he's like, "What do you do?" I mean, those are the most uncomfortable situations when someone who's your superior is said something and then put you in a situation.
Right.
So my son and I were talking about that, and I said, and he said, I said, "What did he say?" And he said, "I think he just he felt like he was being put in a corner, and he just kind of laughed nervously and tried to slough it off."
Because it's your boss.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
But, I think, in that case, I think you could easily say something like, those are my coworkers. I try to not think of them that way, and then.
Yeah, it's like picturing my little sister, right?
Right.
Something like that.
Yeah. So I think and everybody who doesn't talk like that or use that language, I think you set the tone for what's acceptable and what's allowed in conversation with you. Mm-hmm. And you don't have to say, "Knock it off, you racist POS." You don't have to say that. You can just, sometimes I'll look at somebody and say, "Yeah, I don't really think you ought to be using that language here," or "Really, dude?"
You just need it.
Something like that.
Well, is it acceptable to talk about women that way around your buddies? I'll bring a case up this past week. 2 weeks ago, I think. Mike Milbury, who is an analyst, a longtime analyst for the NHL and NBC with the playoffs and that, made some comments about women and being in the locker room and the guys could play better hockey because there's no women around, and therefore they weren't as distracted. And he's suspended for that.
What, there were no women, in the locker room?
No. At the arena, there was no one. So it's like any sports. The NHL, we're in the playoffs now, and he made a comment about, the players aren't as distracted because there aren't pretty women around. And he got suspended, basically suspended for that. Now, I'll hear that and I go, so you know what? Hockey players aren't attracted to women? There's gay hockey players, and that's fine. But what I'm saying is, he's saying, the women weren't around as because guys will, guys, I believe it or not, nothing's changed about the way guys look at women. In a sense that they're like, wow, she's really
absolutely.
cute, right? When women look at guys like, well, he's really cute.
Course.
Is that so? Where's the line blurred there?
So I think when and I'm assuming he said this he said it on the air as part of a broadcast. Is that where he said it?
What's that? On a telecast? And he's basically saying women are hot. Basically, is what he was saying, which is really not news, but in the way he said it, it was kind of skeevy.
Yeah. So I think of the line of thinking that says women wouldn't be attacked or raped if they didn't wear such short skirts. It's sort of that victim blaming sort of thing. So my guess is I look at that because I didn't hear about this case. My guess is that when you're saying that, it's like saying, so a guy's poor play is a result of too many pretty women around, and it's their fault. I mean, I think that's the extension of thinking there.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
And I know I'm sure that's not what he meant.
It's kind of like
you're
here's
right.
the thing. I mean, what we talked about that's egregious. Slurs, obviously, but then you get into things like this where it's. Well, I mean, is that like slandering women? Because, look at every commercial or magazine ad, and women are made to be beautiful, right? And it's like, oh, my God, look at the makeup commercials you see all the time. Well, wait a minute now. If I recognize that, hey, she is so she's attractive in my eyes, and she's a beautiful woman, is that now a slur? Is that now is that off ground? I don't know. Well, you're the career coach. Tell me.
I mean, that's where I think if you're in the workplace and you're making comments about the hot women over in marketing, I think that's inappropriate.
Yeah, don't do it. Could I do that with my buddies, like if I were golfing or something? Is that acceptable? Nobody's there to stop you. Okay.
It's normal human behavior. But again, it's that workplace line. But what happens is if you get in the habit of using that kind of language, every place else but work, it happens sometimes. It slips over into work.
Right. And that could have happened with Tom. I mean, that's a possibility,
I think
too.
So, too. Yeah. I mean, because it came very easily out of his mouth, and he and his buddies may use that word. But there were a lot of people around him that heard it.
Yeah, and that's not good.
I don't know what
good.
went on.
And I tell Tom his face, it's like, man, you can't. That's not cool to use it. But again, does that, in a career sense now, and I'm sure this is a highly publicized case. Obviously, it went out over the air and everything else, and rightly so. There should be a lot of backlash for this, and also a price to pay for this too. But I'm sure this, as you said, it happens at work, maybe not infrequently, but still, it's like there's a price to pay for this kind of stuff, and because times have changed.
Yeah. And the good news is I think we are a land of second chances. There's all kinds of people, regardless of cancel culture or any of that. I think that, almost everybody who's gone through a rough period like that has made a comeback at some level. And I still think we allow for that.
Okay.
And I think we have to, because all of us, if we walked around with a microphone all day long, there's not a person among us who wouldn't say, that probably didn't come out right, or I probably shouldn't have said that. But then it's gradations, it's level. And there are certain things we just don't say in this, my opinion, decent people don't say in this world.
I got you. It's Julie Bauke, our career Sherpa on the Scott Sloan Show on 700 WLW at the Bauke Group, BAUKE, BaukeGroup.com. We talk every Wednesday about career-related stuff, and this is no exception. Indeed. All right, be well. Thanks.